So for something completely different, we were discussing some different ways to create your own style or different mixing of techniques. So this is one I've used before. It's kind of helpful when you're working fast. I've got a coal or a hot press paper here. This is the Artistico Fabriano 300 weight, which is one of the smoothest papers I have, which is nice for markers. I've got a little sketch, and I'm using my alcohol-based grayscale markers. I only have the French gray ones, so they're all warm, to start kind of building up my values. So we've talked about underpainting in acrylics. We've talked about underpainting a little bit in watercolors, but to work on top of watercolor paper like this and to use your markers, you don't blend as much. It's definitely more about like layering and knowing that you're going to go over it. If it's this really hot press, really smooth paper, it does not, it moves really similar to what you're going to be used to, except for that it does suck a little bit more of the ink out of your paper, so it's a little bit more like a sponge. But with the alcohol markers, you do not notice it as much as with the water markers, like water-based markers like Tombows. You do see them kind of suck the color in a lot more. But this is my like 6 out of 9, and it's not crazy dark. It's great for just getting these initial shadows in, especially if you're someone who loves markers and works with them, but then maybe wants to get a more painterly effect for the top layers. So I've worked it up to this amount. I could keep going and adding more shadows. We're going to start from here and see kind of what it looks like when we start adding color on top of it. So mixing kind of a bright orangey red for the skirt here. I'm still leaving my highlights brighter by not painting over them, but just going straight over all the marker areas and letting those colors show through to help deepen my values. And I was going a little speedy, but probably if I wanted this to be even more effective with the markers, I'd go a few steps darker into my shadows and be a little bit more intense with those. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and keep painting with this. I'm not going to add shadows with my paint just so that we get the full effect of working with markers, and I'll add a little bit of marker at the end. So I'm mixing kind of my orangish and my pinkish red here to kind of create a feeling of light around it, a little bit of watered down burnt sienna to do a quick skin tint over the markered areas, leaving my highlights showing, a little bit of purple to shadow the socks, and our whites like in the neck collar piece. I don't know what that is. And then a little bit of brown and some piecey strokes to start shaping in our hair. So here you can see where we were talking about adding some of that marker back in. So I'm using my darker, like my 7, to just quickly lay over this and add some of those shadows in a little bit more intensely. Even though watercolor is transparent, it still has some opacity to it, so I do think we muted some of our midtones to be a little more daring. I always like a little bit of extra multimedia if we're already there, so some white colored pencil to help bump forward our highlights, a little bit of pink colored pencil to help soften and add life to our colors, and then I like to use my micron to do some final details and stuff like this, especially in some more illustration-y style, to add some crispness to my design decisions and to bump forward a few details. As always, I don't like to line it entirely. It's like picking and choosing a few lines, not entirely outlining the thing so that it still feels like it has breath. So this is our finished product. Who knew? You can mix watercolors and alcohol markers.